Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and this episode 409. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter /X. Stacy, how are you doing on a super hot day, June 19th, Wednesday? How are you doing?
Yeah, happy Juneteenth. It is hot as hell. Got in some tennis and new appreciation for guys like Rafa Nadal playing 5 hours and way worse temperature. But yeah, it's hot. TLDR.
Yes, it is definitely. It's definitely very hot out there. But we're not here to talk about the Heat. We're here to talk about the Knicks, and we do have some things to talk about. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements, especially being that Strickland has Instagram. Check that out. That's at Strickland Instagram. We are posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may watch this podcast. If you haven't done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. Strickland has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff on there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I host every Friday at the Press. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, our newest podcast that is hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I range around with the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. Just dropped a great article last week, a little conversational piece that he did with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily. And access to Strickland NFL, which you guessed is our podcast that is hosted by Team Metricos and is about the NFL. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. There's a variety of additional benefits, but there's part recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. It's going to be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Finals this season. Every stat, every matchup, but even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. Well, the NBA Finals is over. Thankfully, gratefully. I did not watch almost any part of Game 5. I finished Baby Reindeer and said, fun show. I mean, not fun. Fun is probably the wrong word to describe that, but a good show. Definitely worth watching. But we're also not here to talk about Baby Reindeer.
When something called Baby Reindeer is not fun, it means it's super dark.
It is.
Yeah, I read this synopsis. Why would you call it Baby Reindeer? That's just mean. That sounds like a nice Disney movie.
If you watch it, you'll see why they call it Baby Reindeer. But yeah, it is not. It's funny. The synopsis of it is that it's a dark comedy, and I was like, it's not actually that funny at all. It's actually just kind of dark. So I don't know. Maybe just maybe it's who knows why they call it.
Well, you watch Barry?
Marketing purposes for that. Anyway, I have not. I've heard it's also a dark comedy, but I've heard that's actually kind of funny.
It is funny because it's Bill Hader, but also it gets super dark. And it's also the guy's name is Barry. You go into it thinking like these shows have these innocuous. At least tell me it's going to be dark. Tell me it's House of the Dragon. Tell me it's a Soprano
House
is
of
actually
Barry, would that have been better?
House of Barry. A soprano is actually a melodic but low sounding voice, I guess. But that doesn't necessarily convey just how uplifting that show was.
Yeah, just a show just about the triumph of the human will. All right. Well, we're not here to talk about that stuff. We are here to talk about the Knicks. And now that the NBA Finals is over, the Knicks, among other teams, any team in the NBA that is, can negotiate with their players that are about to enter free agency, that are still under contract with them, et cetera, et cetera. We got a report that actually picked up steam yesterday on Tuesday, but I think Windhorst had actually said it on Monday on Get Up. He had mentioned, and he said that he had heard that not not all was necessarily hunky dory in the negotiations between the Knicks and OG Anunoby with regards to his new contract, and that was something to keep an eye on, that he might test free agency. This also comes on the heels of Jake Fisher, I want to say a few weeks ago. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but during the combine, he dropped a piece over on Yahoo Sports where he said that there was a sense that OG may have, that it wasn't necessarily a done deal. He was 100% going to return to New York. I still remain skeptical of that. I think that he will be back with the Knicks. But now that we've heard it from both Jake Fisher and Windhorst, I think, and I think Fred Katz echoed something on his pod that he did yesterday. I didn't actually listen to the full clip, but and I don't know necessarily. I don't even know if he said that he had heard that there was really friction between them or that there was concern that a deal wouldn't get done. But I think what he said he had heard from an executive or a source from another NBA team was that OG has them over a barrel, and because of that, there's some issues. Because look, I don't want to bore anybody with the details here, but we are in a new CBA where there is a first apron, there's a second apron, and there are all kinds of concerns and limitations that come when you exceed these things and whatever. Again, not going to necessarily go into the details right this second on that. Now, what I actually did want to do is, because we were debating this on our Discord last night, hey, does he have them over a barrel? What does that mean? I think it's worthwhile to consider what this means. So OG Anunoby from another team, the max contract he can get is 4 years and $181 million. Now, if some team, let's say the Philadelphia 76ers, because they have $62 or $61 million, whatever the fuck they have in cap space, could theoretically offer him that contract. That contract next year would start at just under $42 million. It would be at $41.994 million. Would be the starting salary for his contract next year, because he is not their free agent. They could only give him a max. They can only give him max raises of 5%. I didn't do the math on what that would be year to year hits, but that works out to an average annual value of just over 45, which means that by the end of this contract, you're looking at a contract, probably in year 4 there, that would be over 50 or right around 50 million, if not higher. I still am very, very skeptical that any team would offer him a max. But let's play this out. If any team were to offer him, so let's say the Sixers, hey, we're not going to get Paul George. We got to do something big. Why not go get OG? Let's at least make it painful for the Knicks to retain OG at this max number. And, I guess my question is, do the Knicks just have to match that regardless of what that impacts? And again, I think what would happen if the Knicks did match this contract or slightly exceed it, let's say that they had to slightly exceed it to get him to kind of agree to come back. One, they have an advantage of they can start at a lower number in the initial year, because the Knicks, as the team that currently have his full bird rights, can offer him 7.5% raises. And I have that number for you right here. 1 second. The Knicks can start his first year salary off at $40.46 million. So slightly less in the first year. Do you think they just have to match that, or again, slightly exceed that number? But do you think they just have to do that, or or do you have another option here? And the final piece I'll go to is, is it worth calling a potential bluff here? Because again, I don't think he's got a 4-year max waiting for him out there. I don't. Now, do I think that he could get 160 from another team? Yeah, I do. I do think that. But let's again, if he does have a max offer, do the Knicks just have to match it? Was that where you stand with this, or do you think that
I'm close to that. I would want to. So one, on terms of calling the bluff, I think given you can debate Sam Rose as his primary agent, his agent? Is he Vince? Or sorry, is he Eric? Is he Turtle? Is he Ari? Is he Drama? He's in the process.
Well, I think it's safe to say that it's definitely not Drama or Turtle.
So
maybe his driver. Maybe his driver.
Oh, you think he's that far removed?
No, but I'm just saying I don't think Sam Rose is. I'm just saying I don't think we should definitely not be comparing him to Turtle or Drama.
Yeah. So my point on that is that
unless Sam Rose has the connections with Tequila Company for him or something,
or somehow can pull Meadow. I guess Meadow Soprano went for a guy who thought oblique was a real world word. So Turtle's way in the Turtle, beloved Knicks fan. I'm just giving you shit.
Thanks, like ass. Like, how about give me some?
No, I the reason I bring that up is that I don't think this would get to a point of call your bluff. Like, I think it'll be very transparent on both sides. Everyone is going to have all the information. And Sam Rose is going to be close enough where he can say, hey, Dad, he's not bullshitting. Right? So I don't think it will come down to a question of call your bluff.
Could also just be one where he's like, hey, Dad, like 4/162 might get it done, pal.
Yeah, exactly. And if he doesn't, then somebody's gonna get hurt real bad. So, like, it's that there's just so much transparency there. It's tough for me to believe that would be a thing. If they do give him the max, I'd want to know, like, how far are they from the first apron at that point, which I am not clued.
Yeah, I mean, I can. Let me call Jeremy real quick. Can I get a lifeline here?
I mean, does getting rid of Bogey and possibly Mitch get you under that?
I mean, I'll pull it up. I'll let me try and figure it out, but keep talking.
I mean, so the bottom line is this: I'm inclined to say, yeah, if it's 4/180, you got to do it, because we saw the impact. It not only gives the Knicks the missing piece, it puts other people in. He puts other people in their right positions. This is why we were talking about this in the Discord too. Why has there been such a positive kind of resurgence for Randall on a lot of Knicks spaces? It's not that he got a lot better. I mean, he improved his shot diet this year, I think, but he struggled really bad from three. There were, it wasn't just a linear improvement, but you can see when he plays with OG, so many of the Randall concerns get taken away. Kind of the same way with Minnesota, playing with Gobert and playing with Jaden McDaniels have made some of Cat's defensive shortcomings not as important. And then you add an Ant the same way you add in Brunson. Now some of the offensive shortcomings are not. So he can just be what he is, right? Which is a really good scorer who can draw doubles and with kind of easy reads can distribute. And it puts everything in place. And in that sense, the way,
I don't quote me on this. I'm not exactly sure here. But to my understanding, if the Knicks had to go that full max, so 40.6, they would be over the second apron. The second apron being at 182. If they then non-guarantee Bogdanovich or waive him effectively, he has a $2 million partial guarantee for next year. They waive him, they'd get back under, but they'd still be over the first apron.
Which doesn't allow them to take any more salary back in a trade, so it hamstrings them a bit in the first in the star trade scenario.
They also can't aggregate. The biggest thing is they cannot aggregate salary at that point. So if you're talking about trading for a star, there's still ways to get around that. You have to involve a third team. It can be complex. You can get it done, but it can be complex. It just makes.
But to get a star, you'd have to trade Randall at that point.
There's but it just all becomes it becomes a lot harder for them. Let's just put it that way. It becomes much, much harder for them to go get another star. And if you're under the impression that as good as this team was, they do need one more final piece to put them over the top, then you would be saying that while this is a necessary thing you have to do in the short term, now you've got to figure out, okay, well, how do we now go about getting that final piece? Now that's a question for them to answer. And maybe that's something you're like, hey, if this is what we have to do, we got to do it. And hey, Brock Aller, go earn your salary, figure out how we're going to do this, how we can get the things that we need to get done down the line. But yeah, that's the danger. And like, this is why I think, like, and I will say, I ultimately, this is what I think. I think if the Knicks can get, 160, and I'll do the math to figure out 200 in a second here. So you can do 5 years, 200 if they wanted to. But in a 4-year contract, they go 160. You get that at 35.7 or whatever. You're still going to have to probably waive bogey to avoid the first apron. But now you might be able to use a hefty chunk of that non-taxpayer mid-level exception to go get a legitimate piece and effectively replace bogey in the rotation and still potentially, add guy, like bring back a Burks, bring back a Precious, and remain under the first apron. It still be very tight. And I do think like there's probably a lot of haggling going on about, is it a 4-year or a 5-year deal? Because if it's a 5-year 200, then you can start them off at an even lower number than 35, even if the average annual value is the same. Is there a player option on the 5th year? Is there a team option? All these things are where I assume there may be a discrepancy in negotiations. And I mean, look, you've worked in professional environments. I'm sure you've gone job hunting as you've just started a new job. Like negotiations are all part of that's, what it's like the idea, right? It's don't get emotional about business, like what is Sonny, so
if you can't get emotional about business, I forget the rest of the quote. If you can't get emotional about baseball, I don't know. I didn't actually see the movie. Sorry.
I didn't see the movie either. But like, it's like the Godfather thing, right? Where it's like, this is business and he's taking it very, very personal. It's like, look, I don't think it is a personal thing. I mean, it's never a personal thing.
No,
really.
I mean, I think my whole take on this is I'll believe it when I see it in terms of this. I do think they'll give him 180. They traded away, and I think it's a fair thing. If there are people who are like, they didn't actually give up that much, I don't think that's an unfair thing to believe. RJ Barrett, I think, has potential. He's going to be paid $30 million a year. That's not a cheap player. Emmanuel quickly was. So if you look at just the combined salaries of those, that is going to exceed what they would have to pay OG in this. If he gets 180, that would exceed that. What you would expect when you would. And quickly, for as good as I think was, as much as I think he could make runs, was not going to be fully unleashed here. Be him. And they made that move. And look, I get it. If you're like, you never question the Knicks front office, whatever. It's been 5 years now. This is the 5th year of the Leon Rose front office.
Yeah. And just real quick. So 5 years, $200 million. The starting salary there is 34.4. So that would probably buy them room. Again, that I think that if you waive bogey after that, that gives you room under the second.
Can they trade bogey and just attach a pick or something?
They'd have to guarantee a salary for next year.
So it's still counting against them.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't count against them if they want to just dump his salary that badly. Sure, they can do that. I mean, if anything,
but it doesn't give you benefit in this area.
Yeah. I mean, look, they can also waive him and then stretch the $2 million guarantee over 3 years for like, what is it, $666 repeating. Maybe that, it might
devil's
be a big
number.
Deal. Yeah, it might be a big deal which year they make it $666,667. That $1, who knows? Maybe it comes back to bite them. But either way, this is where I think there's probably haggling, because if you're OG, you're like, hey, no, let's say you want 4 years because you're like, hey, I want to get back on the market and give me a player option on the 4th year, because I want to get back out of the market again and re-up one more time. That's a big deal. But if you're the Knicks, you're like, hey, we'll give you the same average value of the contract, but we want you to sign a 5-year deal. Like this is negotiation, right? This is where it happens. And yeah, look, hands up. Like maybe I was naive potentially in believing that, okay, just because Sam Rose exists, the contract is done and it's there's nothing to discuss. Like, yeah, hands up, that maybe potentially was a very naive thing to believe. But I still believe that like Leon Rose, I'm forget the fact that he worked at fucking CIA, right? Like this guy has been in.
But has he made a mistake
hundreds.
like this?
No,
These are not the mistakes we've. And
well,
it's been 5 years.
Well, it's we can debate mistakes, right? But like the
He's
point is
the
like I don't
mistakes
think
he's
he's
made
going to
as
make.
player evaluating, right?
Well,
Like Evan
I don't.
Fournier, right?
I don't think it's valuable to look at an Evan Fournier thing and compare. They're totally different.
But my point is, this kind of a fumble would be unprecedented in Leon Rose's tenure. These are the kind of situations they've handled. They handled Randall reasonably well. They gave him that extension. They got obviously Brunson on what ended up being an amazing deal. They got Hart to wait a year. These are the kinds of things they've been wait a year before taking the extra money when he could have just asked for gone to free agency. These are the kind of things they've excelled at, right? So this kind of a losing OG for nothing is the kind of thing we just haven't seen from this front office at all. And not only that, the kind of thing we've seen to the extent, now maybe you can say this is a different situation, the Mitch free agency, right? They've worked these out with win-win deals for the most part.
Yeah, no, I think they do. But I think there's more dynamics just at play here. Like, it's not just OG's contract in a vacuum, okay? Like, we know, or it's been reported Brunson could take the max extension available for him this offseason. That would be 4 years, $156 million. I don't know how important it is for Jalen Brunson on a personal level. I don't like for him specifically. How does he feel if he takes a 4-year, $156 million extension while OG takes a 4-year, $160 million deal this year? I have no idea. I don't know. There's no way to answer that. I don't know Jalen Brunson personally. You would hope that that's not that important, but we know that like contracts are how these guys are measured, right? You want to be, like for example, I don't know if OG Anunoby would have the leverage necessarily to get a $35 million average annual deal or 40, whatever it is, if Jeremy Grant hadn't signed that 5-year, $160 million contract last year, but he did. And OG can look at that and be like, hey, well, look, I came to your team. We immediately took off. Yes, I got hurt. Yes, I have had injuries in the past, but we know, and you know, and I know that when I'm healthy, we are an elite basketball team, or that's what it was last year. And that's with Randall, that's without Randall. Okay, so I'm very, very important to your team and your ability to have high level success coming in, like moving forward. And you have no way to replace me, really. You cannot replace me. You've been waiting, you've been dying to get me on this roster. You have no way to replace what I do. There's not that many guys that can do the things I do. Right. So there's that. Like, so there's that dynamic. And Randall's extension eligible. Randall wants an extension. He went back to CAA after whatever, he spent a dalliance with whatever other, I think it was WME or whatever fucking agency it was.
Maybe dalliance, bro, busting out the SAT word.
Is that a big SAT word? I don't know. I don't think dalliance is a big SAT word. It is a nice word though. But like, okay, so now Randall wants an extension. What does it do for Randall's leverage, or how does Randall perceive it if, okay, so let's say OG gets the 4-160, where we're kind of like, okay, that's fine. You do that. It's not a big deal. But if you're Randall, you're like, okay, well, I've been here for, 5 years at this point. I've made 3 All-Star teams. I've made 2 All-NBA teams. I probably would have made another All-NBA team this year, the way it was trending, if I hadn't gotten hurt in a freak accident, right? This is not, like, none of my injuries are things, like, I think there's a very different, like, I know there are people that would be like, well, Randall's gotten hurt, just like Mitch has gotten hurt. And I'm like, I don't think they're the same thing. I don't view Randall as an injury risk at all, the same way that I think that Mitchell Robinson is.
Except he's got a lot of miles and he's 30.
He does, but that's it. But
that comes for everyone. So
yeah. But I mean, and again, there's no way to know this stuff, but I do think that we're seeing evidence that, like, with modern science, these guys have much better longevity and ability to sustain elite production into their mid 30s. And if you're Randall, you can rightfully be like, okay, well, if you're going to give him 4-160, I want 4-170. I want 4-180. I don't even remember what Randall's max extension numbers are, but I'm pretty sure they're right in line there with OG's. But if you're Randall, like, all right, if If you give him that, I want that too. And then if you're Brunson, you're like, well, wait, if these guys are going to get that, then I'm not going to sign my extension now, and I want to wait till next year, and then you can give me 5 years, $270 million, which is what he'd be eligible for then. So, like, I just think there's a lot of dynamics at play here that aren't just about OG's contract. I think if it was just like, hey, we have to give OG 4 years, $180 million, I don't think there'd be much of a negotiation as long as he could prove there's another team out there willing to give it to him. I think he'd be like, all right, fuck it, we got to do it. And ultimately, I agree with you. I think even if that is what is out there, I think you almost have to do it. Like I've spent most of this morning kind of looking at what, like,
it's a beautiful day outside, Shwin.
Yeah, it was not beautiful. It was fucking scorching hot from the moment I woke up. But and I still went for a run. It sucked. But like, if you're, if he wasn't capped at 180 and a team could give him 200 or something like that, I'd feel a little bit differently about it. Because I think that's where you get into numbers where you're like, look, he might be irreplaceable, and we might have to own that we fucked this trade up because now we're losing this guy after 4 months, 5 months for basically nothing or whatever minimum level compensation you would get in a sign and trade scenario. But maybe that's just better. Maybe you're better off doing that because signing a bad contract, especially with this new CBA, has ramifications that are very hurtful to your ability to build your team moving forward. And I think that'd be something to consider. But a 180, I just kind of think you got to, suck it up and do it anyway. But when it's not just giving him that contract, it's the trickle down effect and what that could mean for, okay, well, if we give him this, then we're probably gonna have to give this guy that if we want to keep him. And we're gonna, now Brunson's not gonna extend and he's gonna want this 5-year max. And there's a lot of things to consider. And I'm not gonna pretend that I've sat down and done the math. You want somebody that sat down and done all the math, definitely at Jeremy Cohen on Twitter.
At the coincidence. Yeah. It's a pun. You guys are catching on to puns now.
Yeah. But definitely at him on Twitter. Do that repetitively. I'm sure that he will respond to all of you. He appreciates all of the support that you give him. And I like to promote his content here. So definitely do that. No, if you really he does do a great job. And I'm sure he's worked out these scenarios. And I've listened to his cap and no cap stuff that he's been putting out the last few weeks over on the KFS pod. So he's definitely doing great work. But like, this is all the stuff that needs to be weighed. And then obviously, the Knicks are hoping that they can keep Isaiah Hartenstein at $472.5 million, which would be the max number they can offer him this summer. So like, the money is coming. Like, the money that you're going to have to pay out to these guys it's right there staring at you in the face. And all the decisions you make right now impact other decisions that you're going to have to make and that guys that you want to retain are going to have to make. And we know how much flexibility means to them. That's been a key component of almost every decision they've made, to be honest. Every major roster decision they've made. That was a key component of the trade that they even made for OG Anunoby, which they stated at the time, or which at least was reported at the time, was it gave them more flexibility to retain a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein and all these type of things. So there's a lot going on here. And I don't think it's just as straightforward as, pay OG or not. I mean, maybe in this isolated incident it is, but if you do pay OG, understand that probably impacts a Brunson extension. That probably impacts what you can extend Randall for, and maybe it even impacts. Maybe if you give OG 180, it makes it more likely for an office this offseason to be like, you know what? We sucked it up and paid OG because we just had to. We cannot give Randall an extension, predicated on what we gave OG Anunoby. And if he thinks that we're going to give him parity and that if that's what he wants or exceeding that number even, then we just have to move him now because we're not going to do it. So that it's just, I just think there's a lot of stuff when it comes down to, not just the decision of what to pay OG and matching a potential max offer and all this stuff. I don't think it's that simple. I think there's a lot going on.
Is there an argument that, given how close this team was, even being down to their 6-man rotation, a game away from the Eastern Conference Finals, they probably, that version of the team wasn't doing much against Boston. I think it's fair to say that. But we saw this team. Is there an argument that
Mickey Mouse Boston, the Mickey Mouse Boston title,
the Mickey Mouse title? Given
that's the official party line of the Strickland, by the way.
We will have a better one when we get our own Mickey Mouse title.
No, that won't be Mickey Mouse. That'll have been a journey where we overcame
to here and back again.
Yeah, millions of obstacles. We will have had to summon
the fires of Mordor.
We will have to have summoned the great Lord Ganesh to remove the obstacles from our path.
Maybe Gandalf comes from Ganesh. You never thought of that.
Yeah. Kudos.
Given that the extensions don't kick into next year, is there still an argument to be like,
yes,
Que Sera and those things we have this year? We'll have everybody from this team that was just destructive as hell in the month of January, which a lot of people are poo-pooing that, and you've made this point before. They beat Denver by 38. They smoked Philly with Embiid, and
we can probably say safely, like, even if they weren't going, I mean, they were not going to sustain being like plus 18 net rating or the fuck it was the rest of the way.
They should challenge Boston.
Yeah, it's not even just that. Like, the reality,
and Boston is what people say is a historically good team. So I don't think it's like, well, could you beat them? It's like, well, this is just like Brad Stevens has made great moves. Let's lay the cards on the table. This does not have a high level superstar. This is Boston's 1A, by the way, right? Let's say in the last, has there been who's the last 1A that was as good as Jason, or was not better than Jason Tatum? You have to go back to the Spurs in 20.
You're just saying who is the last who was the last first option on title team that was not as good as Tatum?
Yeah.
And that's probably that 2014 Spurs team, which, similar to Boston, was super successful because of just being super well-rounded and having 7 to 8 to 9, whatever, really good players.
They also had 4 guys that could be like, I can't do this full. Well, they had one guy that probably could do it full time. They just didn't need him to. I think Kawhi was already there. He just was kind of kept on the shelf a little bit.
Yeah, their team dynamic wasn't at the point yet where they.
But like Tony Parker could play that guy on TV, right? Tim Duncan, he had, I think, 25 and 10. I think the first half of Game 5.
I mean, he's still, but
he was capable of 1A level play.
Well, Duncan, when they won that championship, if you go back and watch like their series against Oklahoma City, they won that in Game 6 on the road in overtime. Like, you go back and watch that, like their entire offense is just like, all right, just throw it to Duncan in the post, make it happen, big guy. Like he was still capable.
Manu was still capable. Manu threw down that dunk on Chris Bosh.
They had guys that could dial it up in moments, which effectively is what Boston did this year in a different way. Like they're younger in a lot of, like, their key guys especially are younger. So it feels different, but it is different. It is the same in terms of, like, is Tatum capable of delivering on every given night? No, but he can deliver on one of every 3 games or whatever it is. And you know what? Even when he sucks,
drawing a lot of attention.
Yeah, and even when he doesn't have a good game, it's not just that he's drawing attention. He's also a plus defender. He's a plus rebounder. So he's giving you value even on his bad shooting games, which isn't always the case for first options, right? Like Jalen Brunson, I love him. And yes, when he's on the floor, he's always going to command attention, which has its own value, even when you're shooting poorly. But you're never going to be like, well, Brunson shot poorly today, but he was so locked down on defense, it didn't matter, right? Like, or he just monster on the glass. Yeah. So it's a different dynamic. But yeah, like, I think that.
But my point is that this is a historically well set up team. A lot of people have said that. And if you want to say they had a Mickey Mouse run and all that, fine. What I'm saying is I
will be saying that for the rest of my life, actually.
But if we're talking about our team building objectives, to say that, okay, we're at the point where we have we have more than puncher's chance. We're like close to 50-50 against Boston, isn't like a failure. That's a pretty noble goal, and running it back even for a year to give yourself that shot is not nothing. I do think we need to talk about a little bit, like, if they pay all of these guys, if they get the Randall extension, they get the Brunson extension, they get the OG extension, or if they have to pay Brunson next year, I think that's a much bigger risk than having to pay Randall next year. If you have to pay Brunson $60 million, it would be $60 million, or it'd be 5 for, would you say 270?
Yeah.
So like $54 million a year. What happens then? Then you're like fully second apron. We don't give a fuck about James Dolan after paying luxury tax. I don't think the Knicks are really in that kind of a situation where it would be an issue, but that is where all this stuff I think really starts to come into play. And because I think OG is going to be not as movable if you pay him 4 for 180, because that's kind of the double-sided part of this, is that, so you're telling me there's teams that'll pay him 4 for 160 now or 4 for 180 now, but in a year, if you're like, all right, we want to trade this guy, wouldn't be willing to give up first round picks? That's just a little, like, everything that's like, unless he has another injury that's just debilitating, which no one, like, again, all of the information that would predict that is available to everyone now. You would think his value shouldn't change too much in a year if they had to move him, or if they had to move Randall, right? So you're not really, if that's the market, that's the market. And the market is usually pretty smart. Like, there's not a lot of teams that, like, how many overpays have we really had that weren't, constrained by team dynamics? Like a team just being like, hey, we want you, come over. Like, people thought Brunson was that. Obviously he wasn't. Beal, I guess, was that. But that was a former scoring, you mentioned a second leading scorer. That's a 30-point per game guy. I don't think there's like if OG's value is really 4 for 180 right now, it's not going to change that much in a year. So there will still be teams that value him. I don't think anyone's going to give him money like that just for the fuck of it, just to fuck with the Knicks. That might be an added benefit, but not the primary reason where, like, in a year they'd be like, oh no. Unless he gets another debilitating injury, in which case that's just kind of a risk you have to take. If you think that's coming, that's the bullet that the Knicks dodge with KP. But actually, this is a good follow-up. Sorry, do you have something else? I have a follow-up question I wanted to ask you.
No, I was going to say, like, I think the other part of this is you're probably more willing to like, you might have to just pay these guys and then figure, like, again, you just have to figure it out later. And what you can do, look, if you're over the second apron, there's obviously a shit ton of restrictions to that. There are a ton. We don't need to go into them. You can't combine salaries in trade. You can't, but you can trade. Let's say you're like, man, we think if we fine, we'll give Randall this extension he wants. Let's say it's 4 years, 180, whatever. Yeah, it's not necessarily what we want to do, but we want to do it to keep the asset, right? To keep that salary alive. And we're confident that if we need to in a year, if this team still isn't as good as we think it should be, or as good as as it should be, we're confident that there'll be a team that'll give us a couple of role players for him that make less money, which is another key component. But, like, you can do that. That's something that they would have to be confident of, obviously, and something that they would have to just actually get done after the fact. But yeah, like, I do kind of think they're in a situation where, is it unfortunate that you're making a lot of these decisions on, a very limited sample size, unfortunately? Yes. But, is there reason to believe that OG Anunoby will not do what he does when he's healthy? No, I don't think there is. Is there a reason to believe that Julius Randle, is there any reason to believe that this team won't be very, very good next year if you just keep it together and pay these guys? I don't think there is. I think there's maybe they're not, again, like fucking plus 15 net rating dominant, but they're almost definitely going to be, assuming relative health, a 55, 56.
He makes everybody better. That's the thing.
But it's not just
Randall better.
I'm saying it's not just. Yeah. But it's not just him. My point is, if you keep it back together, forget who is doing the most and who's elevated. that group together is going to be a 55-ish win team.
What I'm
They're
saying
going to
is
be a contender in the East, and you're going to have a puncher's chance. And look, we saw it this year. Like as great as Boston was, and they were really really good in the playoffs.
in the armor.
Yeah, and they were the best team all season. There's no question about that. But we saw in the playoffs, much like OG getting hurt, Kristaps got hurt. He barely played in the playoffs. He barely played. How many games did he even play? 5, 6 games max?
That was going to be my follow-up. But...
Yeah. So he didn't play. So like just like they took a risk in trading for Kristaps, like, yeah, you took a risk in trading for OG, and they took a risk in extending Kristaps, and you've got to take a risk in trading in extending OG potentially, if it's above the number you want to give him. And if that necessitates that you take other risks, then maybe you have to do that, because ultimately the point you're always trying to get to in team building is be a contender. And the Knicks have enough evidence to suggest that, yeah, they're a contender, because even with all the shit they dealt with in the playoffs and everything, they won 50 games this year. They finished as a 2 seed, and
without Randall, they're making the Eastern. Is it fair? Pacers fans are going to hate it. Without Randall,
I don't think any Pacers fans are listening to this part of this podcast.
I would like to think that Mark and Caitlin listen to us. Probably not.
I have better things to do, like actually like cutting film and providing real analysis,
doing the real work. I think this is an Eastern Conference Finals team if they didn't have even with the Mitch injury. Yeah. And if they had Mitch back, maybe they give a threat. The only thing I was saying is that like OG is the one. You lose Hartenstein, that's a big deal. Let's not sugarcoat that. I think this is still a contender with minimal moves, right? You can find the Mavs show this. I don't know if we'll find Derek Lively. I actually like a lot of the big options that the Knicks have in the draft, but that is a Prez question for you and a Prez pod talk. But you can, the Jalen Smith is a guy that's been thrown around. You have ways to kind of mitigate that. OG OG unlocked Randall in so many ways. That is a big deal. That is something that's beyond, he averaged this many points, he missed this many games. You unlock Julius Randle, and I do think it would translate to playoffs, and that might be a good question to talk about. That is why he is so important. It's not just that this team bringing everybody. Yes, that is the thing, bring everybody back. But after Jalen Brunson, there is no one that transforms the team, including their 2 really good centers, amazing centers, including their 3-time All-Star. There's nobody that transforms, and he puts everyone in the right place. You have less Josh Hart trying to play up. You have less Josh Hart at the point of attack for a lot of matchups, right? Josh Hart can do that. It's one of his great, but you really like him in passing lanes. We've talked about Dante, but again, with OG out there, some of Dante's defensive shortcomings become a lot less pertinent because he is the eraser back there. And you already have an eraser at the rim with the Knicks. So that is how valuable he is. The question is, if he was playing 60 plus games a year, this isn't even a question. He's 4 for 180. He's probably worth a lot more than that. When he's healthy, he's worth more than that. I would actually argue that because he gets space for. But I'll ask you this: the Knicks at one time in the recent history had a 22-year-old guy who was a elite rim protector at that time, reasonably mobile for his size. I know there were I actually think Porzingis' mobility was underrated on the Knicks on defense just because of how much they asked him to do. Like he would get cooked by who was it? Anthony Tolliver, right? Yeah. But it's also every time Anthony Tolliver hit a corner 3, it's because Porzingis was helping in the paint, and they had 0 other good defenders. They had the option to pay him 5 years, 158, right? That was I think the going rate at that time. And the Knicks balked for good reasons. They didn't have that team in place. If they're in the same situation now with this team, you'd have to think they would just pay that, right? That was a big reason. We can talk about what they got back and whether it worked out, blah, blah, blah. They were not paying him that. And in retrospect, especially, it's like, yeah, you didn't have anything in place to pay a guy who ultimately is not a number 1 option, an amazing player. Do you think if the Knicks were in that, like, let's say they didn't have Randall and they had Porzingis and they had to make that extension right now, I think they would make it, right? And it's pertinent because I think it does, apply a little bit to the OG situation.
Say that again. If
If the Knicks replace Randall with 21-year-old Porzingis, this is a weird hypothetical, I know. So let's say we didn't have Randall, we have 21-year-old Porzingis, we have the rest of our team that's currently now. We have Brunson, we have all this stuff. You have this guy who's torn his ACL, a lot of injury history, and he would demand 5 years, 158. The Knicks would pay that in this situation if they had that Porzingis right now, right? Even with the injury history,
probably. I don't know, because you could still make the argument at that point where it's like, hey, but maybe at that, well, you could still get like good value for him. So maybe you could. Like,
well, the Mavs didn't, right? So
the Mavs didn't, but like the Knicks, if in this scenario where it's 21-year-old Porzingis, like maybe they still trade him at the deadline because they're like, well, he doesn't help us this year, and we don't really want to pay him what he wants, so we can get good value. Like, it's a different scenario. If they kept him, yeah, I mean, look, if they keep him in this weird hypothetical you presented, then I'm assuming they would likely pay him, yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point. It's that like overpays when you're a contender are just less of an issue. You know, and especially with younger guys, I mean, Wiggins got overpaid and Minnesota was able to wriggle out of that, right? And I think OG has demonstrated himself to be much more, unless you really think his body is about to break down. OG's what, 26, 27?
26, I know.
Yeah,
actually,
so
I think he might be 27, I'll check.
Yeah, so he can't create his own. I mean, he even showed some creation. Like,
let's pump the brakes. He's turning 27 in July.
No, in the playoffs, I will not pump. Well, I will ease up on the gas there if you want, but I am pumping the brakes. Like, he was going to the mid range, hitting those. He hit some tough fadeaways. And if we're gonna talk so much about the playoffs with other players, why can't we mention that he did step up his creation in the playoffs when he was asked to? And he gives you the switchability. He gives you the three-point shot. He wasn't even deployed correctly for most of the playoffs. There's no, like, if it's 180, you bite that and you figure it out later. I think Brunson is going to have generational wealth no matter what. He already has it. You know, if he's keeping, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's keeping score just by whether he got 50 million.
It's not necessarily keeping score. It's a lot like, I mean,
Duncan did it.
Duncan did it. I don't think you can always expect it. Like,
you can't expect it. That's fair.
Yeah, and it's also fair to be like, look,
I don't think it's a reason to hamstring yourself, because the thing is, if they don't pay OG, they're back to the team. Here's the thing: if there's an argument that, like, well, then you made this trade, the argument would be, even at full strength, the Knicks would quickly, maybe if they play quickly more at the two like we wanted instead of Grimes and even Devo, the team elevates a little bit. That was a play-in /6 seed at that point in this East. That there's no getting around. Their ceiling was capped. You're going back to that if you get rid of OG, and you don't have pivots around that. Besides, you know, maybe Deuce turns into an all-star, or Dante continues to improve. Like, they have outs there, but those outs are now 99th percentile outcome. You're going back to not being a contender if you don't re-sign OG, and you don't really have pivots there. You have your picks, but not signing OG doesn't really give you much more flexibility with using. I mean, it gives you flexibility for like sending out salary in a trade, but who are you getting back? That's a very tough game to play. You already know you have a contender here, and you still have those picks, and you have a year before the salary issues really become debilitating, especially with the option to get rid of Bogey. And even if you don't even have to sign a replacement, I don't think. You have Deuce, you have Hart. You go short early in the year, and you short rotation, and you know you can sign someone. You have your draft picks. You have many avenues if you sign OG to like incrementally shore it up. What you're really looking for at that point is insurance, because he's not going to play 80 games. He's not going to play 60 games. You're really looking for insurance, but you have. I mean, you're not going to deal probably with another season of Randall being hurt. You know, Mitch, but you can probably get a decent player given his salary back if you do a 1-for-1. You still have a lot of options. Like, they're not locked in. They're locked out of getting another star. Or it becomes much more difficult I still think that trade-off is. I mean, who's the star they're gonna get? And it's not like they can't get a star; they can. But who is the star that letting OG walk opens up? I don't see that, or
Yeah,
it's worth it because the stars they're gonna get are also gonna be offensively oriented. So you're still gonna need that wing defender at that point. Maybe another creator like Donovan Mitchell allows Hart to be that guy, but I would much rather make the former bet.
well, maybe Paul George will decide he doesn't need to get vaxxed and miss like a couple years just doing his own thing, and then the Knicks can trade for him on like fucking relative discount, and then he'll get it together again. That's the Dallas path to being a contender. But like, yeah, no, like people will point to Dallas, and like they clearly have extricated themselves from what looked like a dead in the water situation a year ago, potentially, maybe a little over a year ago. And obviously now they won the Western Conference Finals, and they were in the finals, lost to Boston. But like that's not. I mean, that was such a weird kind of confluence of events, right? Where it's like you randomly get Kyrie on a discount because of all his off the court bullshit, and
what did they end up trading for? It was like a first and
2 swaps, I think.
Was it Grant Williams in that trade or no?
No, that was Grant Williams separate trade.
That was PJ Washington,
yeah, and then they got like 2 seconds and whatever it was. But like that's not like a reason. Like, and then obviously they drafted Derek Lively, in the draft, and he ends up being kind of a gem. He was a gem for them. High impact player as a rookie. So those are not normal things you can bet on, and we'll see if what the longevity of that is anyway. Like, maybe Kyrie isn't always going to be on his best behavior, whatever. The point is, yeah, like I think it's fair to say that, like, if you want to argue that giving OG X contract would it would hamstring us, and the flexibility is preferable, and we believe that we'll be able to find ways, okay, that's fine. If you believe that, that's fine. But one, you're going to and deserve to get criticism for the trade you did make for a player who you then let walk after 35 fucking games, whatever it was that he played for us, half a season. And you will get criticism up until the point you address the hole again. And that's like, do you want to deal with that? Is that and you can
also just not hard. I mean, it took getting rid of quickly to just get this guy who has his own clause.
I don't even think it's that. It took them 3.5 years of being
plus here. The Cam Reddish experiment was very much to try to do this.
So it took 3.5 years and other attempts to get this type of player before you got him, which should tell you how hard it is to get this type of player, which ultimately is why I do think they will pay OG. I don't think he will get a full max. I think they will find a middle ground that gives them the necessary breathing room they want to exist under the first apron this year. Honestly, more than the extensions in the pipeline for Brunson and Randall, I do think a lot of this comes down to not wanting to be above the first apron this year. I think that's what they want to avoid, because if they can avoid that for this year, it leaves them open to aggregating salaries for a star, longer for at least another year. And that's ultimately what I think is what they are worried about right now is we want to have the flexibility. It doesn't just need to be a star. It's just making any kind of trade is more difficult once you're over the first apron.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you need a car, you need a specific car with 4-wheel drive that does all these things, and you got to pay it. You're still going to try to pay as little a premium as you can, right? That's just what it comes down to. And most of the reports, and also this is the other thing I'll add, what we've heard about this front office is they're very tight-lipped. By the way, do you think all of these problems would be solved if Leon Rose did a press conference?
Yes, that's it.
It would probably just get everything. I would imagine most of these reports from Windhorst, from Fisher, all these guys are not without sources or substance, but they're coming from probably OG's representation. You are in a negotiation, they're playing the game, and Leon's going to play the game. But ultimately, I think do you think OG wants to stay in New York where he had the most? Well, it's not the most playoff success. Obviously, he won a ring, but he's a very significant contributor on a team that has a chance to win the championship every year. Do you think he wants to leave for, he could be that in Oklahoma City? I do not think so.
I think the only situation, the only situation that's comparable would be Philly, and ultimately, I just don't see the Knicks.
Well, if they're going to pay him, they're going to pay Paul George, right?
Well, we don't know what's happening. They could happen. Maybe they will. Who knows? But like, one, I just really don't see Daryl Morey paying a guy who's never averaged 20 points per game that type of money. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe that's just
I mean, he's an advanced analytics guy. And those do favor.
I think that entire
I keep
thing
saying Obi instead. Wow.
I think that entire thing with Morey is fucking bullshit. This entire advanced analytics stuff. Like, give me.
You think he's just like a star? Yeah, that's fair.
He's a fucking star fucker. That's all he is. He's all this advanced analytics. Oh yeah, I'm sure the advanced analytics were like, let's give PJ Tucker money and Daniel House. Get the fuck.
Are you saying he's NBA Elon?
I think so. Yeah, I think he's very good salesman of himself. Oh, let me do a fucking New York Times article with Michael Lewis and talk about how, that shot by Kobe only had a 20% shot of going in. That was so painful to watch, but I watched the game like a fucking loser. Fucking get a life. Yeah, like I just don't see him going to that place. Like for 160, sure, I can see him offering that. But and it sounds crazy to be like, really, you think the difference between 160 and 180 is that significant? I do think it's that significant.
$5 million a year.
Yeah, that's a significant chunk of change, and we know that every dollar counts way more under this new CBA. So I do think that matters.
But I think I actually don't agree with you. But I would say that if the difference is that low for Philly, it would be that low for Leon too, right?
Right, but the Knicks don't have cap space, so they are much less flexible in this scenario.
But they can offer that, right? And in that
sense, they can offer more,
and they're less flexible, I would say, not offering that because they can't really use. There's nothing they can use that for to replace him with someone, So in that sense, they are backed into a corner. They're more desperate. They have to match it,
right?
Like I don't think there's a scenario in which they let him walk. That's what I'm saying. I think
they'll find him a middle ground, and I do think.
I think if it goes to 180, I think they don't let him walk. Would I buy into arguments that it would be intelligent to let him walk? I can see that. I think their path to contention, back to contention, by the way, because they'd be going backward, would be difficult. But I can see the reason in that. I ultimately just don't think they.
No, I don't think.
If the argument is that 160 versus 180 wasn't a big difference, then it's not a big difference. I mean, even with I get.
No, I think it is a big difference.
You think it's a big difference, but for someone who is saying that Philly would go to 180 because it's not that big a difference, I would say that it's not a big difference for the Knicks. And
my argument is that I don't think Philly will ever do it. I don't think Philly will.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So
I'm just saying, even people that would counter that by saying, why wouldn't they go up to 180 in that point? I'd be like, then why wouldn't the Knicks, right?
Yeah, then the Knicks just have to. That's what it is. Which is why I think I think the Knicks know that. I think OG knows that. I think I don't think either of them is under the idea this is the part we don't know. We don't know what the actual discrepancy or what the middle ground is they're trying to find here. We don't know what the fine.
I think they're both trying to find out the market, right? They're both trying to see what is that number, and you bring your proof, I'll bring my proof. Let's hash it out, right? And that's what all of these reports are, is trying to drum up that interest and say how far are you willing to go, and then you can go back to. I mean, we've seen free agents do this to the Knicks, right? How many times? Is it fair to say OG is Grant Hilling these teams? I don't think that's unfair to say.
No, I don't think so either. And I think it behooves him to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't begrudge him to negotiate. I don't begrudge the Knicks negotiating. So why should I begrudge the player for negotiating? And we don't know what their discrepancies are, but I think there's a difference between. I mean, even in the Windhorst thing, he still said the belief around the league is that he's still going to be with the Knicks. So
why would he do that?
Yeah, right. I don't. This is not him being this is not the Rudy Gobert Windhorst thing. It's not that. So, I understand why people are freaking out. I also just think like, I'm sorry. I think this front office deserves benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And I'm just not going to freak out until something happens. Like, I'm not going to freak out about reports of anything. I'm just not, because I think it's bullshit. Like, not that it's bullshit, but again, they've just earned the benefit of the doubt to me.
Like, if there's reports that they're going to trade all their firsts for DeJounte Murray, I think that would have more merit to be freaked out about, even though they haven't done something like that either.
Well, then, I definitely wouldn't freak out about that, because that's just stupid. It's not going to.
Well, what I'm saying is, can you make the argument that they've undervalued present first round picks, perhaps a little bit? I think you could make that argument. The Cam Reddish trade wasn't great. Could they have found a way to get Jalen Williams and not make that trade to free up the cap space for Brunson? Like, that's the kind of thing where there's some precedent for, like, no front office is perfect. Every front office has flaws, and this front office's flaw might be that they don't quite value, especially given their scouting and how good it is, later first round picks. But negotiation and, keeping the guys on your team happy and understanding team building, which OG is critical to, and the market value of those kind of players, I don't think they've ever been caught with their pants down there. I mean, who's stolen a free agent from the Knicks?
The Lakers, they got Cam Reddish. Nobody. It hasn't really happened yet. But
and in fact, the Mitchell Robinson thing, I think, is really pertinent, right? That was a guy. There were so many people who thought he was going to walk.
There were reports of it.
They paid him what at the time was considered, I don't know, you could have got Jalen Duren. Now it looks like even with his injury issues, it looks like a really good deal, right? Mitch barely played, or he played very little this season. Got hurt against them in the playoffs. No one's calling that an albatross, and that's for arguably a top 10 center. I think Hartenstein is better for the Knicks, and I think he's better probably for most teams, but if he's a top 10 center, then Mitch is right there too.
Yeah, definitely possible. All right. Well, that's our take on the OG situation. We'll see what happens. I'm definitely curious. We'll see what happens. But there has been other NBA news, slop, as one might call it, for this day. The Indiana Pacers apparently have agreed, or they will be, or have, I don't know what the exact verbiage or reporting is. They're going to sign Pascal Siakam to a 4-year, $189 million maximum contract extension, or just new contract after this in free agency, per Adrian Wojnarowski. I can't help but think about how this influences the Knicks, in terms of, I actually don't think this matters to the OG
argument. Quote tweeted it and saying, does this influence the OG market? At which my answer would be a resounding no, but
I don't see what you can't, they're not even remotely the same player. Like, they're just different archetypes of players. So no, it's not the same thing.
The similarity is that they both were traded for, right? Both teams invested capital to acquire the person before you even get to free agency. So there's a sunk cost thing there, right? Where, you don't want to make it a sunk cost. So, or you're using that sunk cost as part of it.
I just think it's a totally different scenario. But I do think it impacts a negotiation with
PG.
No, not with PG, but with Randall. Like, if I'm Randall, I see that, I'm like, well, I'm better than him. So that's my money. I want that money. Why am I not getting that money? And to the Knicks, they'll probably be like, well, the funny thing about that is Pascal Siakam played really well in the playoffs this year, which you have not proven yet. Maybe that's not your fault. Maybe there are a bunch of extenuating circumstances, but you haven't done it yet.
I think, Leon just needs to go up to him, give him a hug, and say, listen, it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
I don't know how that would.
It's not your fault.
I don't know how that would relate to this scenario.
It's not your fault. Shwin, it's not your fault.
Thank you. I don't know. I get it for the Pacers. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being way too much of a hater. Like, I don't really love it. Like, I don't love committing. It's basically like, so they're more or less capped out now, which is, again, I don't think that's a crisis. The Knicks are also capped out. I still think they have flexibility, just like the Pacers have flexibility. But they're very committed now to Pascal and Halliburton, who got his. Thank God that he made All NBA. We know that he desperately needed that at the expense of his hamstring. Poor guy. So he's got his 5-year. I think it's 270 million, 272 million that he's qualified for now.
What's Turner? I'm looking up Turner right now too.
Well, Turner has done last year of his deal. This upcoming season, he's on like 20 million or something like that.
They need to extend him. Like he's
they will likely extend him. Like this is more or less your team. They've also got a Nembhard contract, so he's up for an extension this offseason.
He's been in the league 3 years. Wow.
No, he's been in the league 2 years, but he's a he's a second round guy. So they're extension eligible after like Deuce.
Just a Brunson situation.
Yeah, Deuce was extension eligible last year, for example, last summer, but the Knicks didn't extend him until the season. They've got, so this is like, if they extend Turner as well, and then let's say they like, I'm actually really curious about the Nembhard thing because I think Nembhard, I don't know, man. If I'm him, I might play it out because.
Would you take him over quickly?
I mean, he played well in the playoffs. So if you're valuing that, sure. And he started at the 2 guard next to like he's proven that he can do that next to a weak defensive one, to be generous. I thought he played really well when he had to be the creator. Unfortunately, we experienced that in the most annoying way possible. He did slump for a while, so it is fair to mention that. He got hot at the right time from 3 in the playoffs. So, is that him being a playoff riser? Is that just him getting hot at the right time? But I like Nembhard. I think he's a good player, and I think that kind of because they got Halliburton, he's never had the kind of latitude to just be the lead guard. It is a little bit of a quickly situation in that sense. But he's starting. So you would think that, okay, he's starting. This is starter money we're looking at here for this guy. Starter money we know has increased rapidly in the NBA. I'm curious. I'm very curious, like what that number could be. Because if I'm him, I'm not taking. I wouldn't 20. I wouldn't take 20. I or at least like I might take it if I just am like, you know what? Let me just get this money right now. Let me secure.
But then you'd be like 30-year player option or something like that.
Yeah, I would want some things. I would want
or like the Brunson type contract.
I would just want something. Yeah, I would just want some things. I would be like, hey, I want a player option. I want this thing. I want that thing. Like I would want some things in there, and that'll be a very interesting one because the way he played in the playoffs, I can imagine his agent, if he has a good agent, I have no idea who his agent is. His agent is a good agent, getting the lay of the land around the league, and teams being like, hey, we would love to have him here as our starter for $26 million a year or something. Like I'm very curious. I thought he played really well in the playoffs. Again, he got hot at the right time, which is always nice. But even in the regular season, I've seen enough games from him where I'm like, I don't know. He's like, he had that game as a rookie. Was it against Golden State where he went off? Like he's had some monster games.
Regular season stats: 9, 4 assists, 2 rebounds.
How many games did he start though?
He started 47 games, averaged 25 minutes. So per 36, that's 13 and 6. But his shooting numbers 50, 36, 80. True shooting 57. Reasonably efficient. Isn't a massive liability on defense, although I think the Knicks were able to pick on him.
I mean, that was weird. The Knicks were able to pick on him with Brunson. So, like,
honestly, I was expecting his efficiency to be a lot higher than what I'm seeing now, because from watching him play, my take is very much in line with yours. Shooting 92% assisted. So, looking at it this way, I think he's insane from the corner. He shot 53% from the corner. But in terms of that's where I think the Quickly thing is a little bit different, because Quickly in Toronto also proved he's really effective as an on-ball guy because of that pull-up ability.
Yeah, Nembhard crazy in the playoffs. He had a 65.4 true shooting in the playoffs.
Yeah, but how many of those were assisted though? I mean, it's still a lot of 90%. Yeah. So my point is, so that kind of efficiency is what you expect.
And in the playoffs, like he scored 15 points per game, 5.5 assists, 3 rounds. We also saw him scale up when Halliburton was out, which
He's also 24 now. I mean,
I just think
think
if
he's
you're a
closer to
team,
Dante as an eval than like a lead guard, like even a Cole Anthony type. You know what I mean? And that I think does. I like Cole Anthony a lot, so maybe that's my own bias.
I mean, Cole Anthony sucked shit in the playoffs, and I like Cole Anthony, but like I
These
think
are small samples, and if you're gonna bring
Cole
up the
got off to a
playoffs,
nice start this year, and he was not good after that. Nemhard had a
I'd
better
also
season.
add with Nemhard was not playing a murderer's row of healthy defensive teams.
He wasn't. He was not. I just think that I've seen a way more from him to be like. To me, when he's had
like, I wouldn't
opportunities to
overvalue
actually,
the playoffs.
I think when he's had opportunities to be a lead guard, he's been legit good. And I mean, I can pull up his splits right now.
I mean, even in the playoffs, 90% of his shots were assisted. Like, he is still mostly a spot up guy who can attack off the dribble. I'm not gonna, but like, he's not that dynamic pull up shooter. He can make the right play, and everyone in Indiana can. Not a particularly advanced playmaker. I think he's a solid guard. He's the kind of guy who can start. Certainly, Dallas could have used him. But in terms of like Dante, I think he would get Dante DiVincenzo money. That's I think, or like a little more than that, because Dante DiVincenzo is underpaid. But that's the kind of, like, you're still looking at a catch and shoot guy who can attack closeouts, is not a huge defensive liability. But that's in terms of more than that, he showed he can play backup point guard, like better than a guy like Deuce, for example, right? Like, if we had him instead of Deuce, our bench
he
minutes
started the last two playoff games, and he put up 32, 9-4, and 24, 10 and 6.
It's 2 games. I think that's important.
It's 2 games in the Eastern Conference Finals against the NBA champion, who were also the second or third best defensive team in the league.
But it is 2 games. That is a small sample.
It is 2 games. I'm just saying, like, when he starts and he actually gets lead guard reps, this is the problem with his numbers. All of his starter numbers are with him, or majority of it.
Starter, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, like they're with him as like a 2 guard playing off of Halliburton. But when he has had but when he's had opportunities to be the lead guard, I think he's been really good. And yeah, it's a small sample, but it feels like every time he gets that opportunity, he looks really good. And
people said
I don't
this
know.
to me about George Hill, though. There was a time when people wanted the Spurs to trade Tony Parker because George Hill was really good in his absence. So
I don't know.
I'm not trying to poo-poo.
I don't remember George Hill having 32 and 9 in a playoff game. Yeah, an Eastern Conference Finals game.
Again, I don't want to keep saying the same thing. So I will say, I think your point is valid, and I think there is like an upside case for teams to explore. If you're Orlando, like, that's the kind of player you should absolutely be taking a swing on. If you're Oklahoma City, I think that's absolutely the kind of player you'd want to take a swing on. But that valuation that brings him up to 20 million is still very much on low sample, and like, because the thing is, I
think the sample's already there for him to be a $20 million guy. He's already started effectively next to Tyrese Halliburton. Now his numbers might be what they are, but
in a league where Dante's getting 12 million a year,
that's not how the league works. That's not like the Knicks got a bargain. If Dante played out, if he had signed a 1-year deal with the Knicks and he hit the market now, what would he get? 25 million?
Yeah.
Pretty easily. Like, if I'm Nemhard, I'd be like, well, no, like I might take 20 million if I'm him, because let me lock that in, and I'm still young enough where I can have a chance to hit the market again. I'll get paid. Maybe have a chance to get mega paid down the line. But right now, let me lock that in. But if you start coming in at like, I think they gave Neesmith like 3 years, 33 million extension before last season. If I'm him, I'm like, no, I'm not signing that. Like, I need substantially more than that.
Yeah. So I agree. If you're looking at his body of work as a starter next to Halliburton, I think he's worked that. I'm just saying that the kind of tail end of the distribution, or like that playoff guy, is someone you can actually pay as a lead guard, or like, that's where I'm like, because the flip side of that is that's not a guy that teams would have scouted as much, right, in that role. We saw that.
So you like Nemhard in his role?
Well, no, I'm saying is that we saw the same thing with Jeremy Lin, right? He hadn't been scouted, and he blew up. He gave Kobe 38. That was I think a Western Conference Finals team that year.
No, but it doesn't matter. 38 in a game is 38, and it was a game.
And they were a Western Conference contender. I don't know if they made the finals, the Western Conference finals. They were a good team that year. So the point is, like, and that's not the playoffs, but I don't think teams are going to make that bet that Nembhard can come in and be our lead guard, unless you're a team like San Antonio, where you're like, well, what are better options, right? And maybe that's part of his market, but I wouldn't just bring that into his valuation as much.
But he's extension eligible this year. I'm not. He's not able to hit the market this year.
Yeah, but what he would get on the market is going to influence that.
And my point is, like, if they are coming in at like 15 a year, I'd be like, well, I'll just play it the year. I'll just play it out and see what happens, because then I have an opportunity. And I think if he puts together another year, even if his numbers stay what they are in that role, if he's still good and they're still winning his minutes with Tyrese Halliburton, and he's still showing you flashes of like, hey, I can play in the pick and roll, and he's added more to his game or whatever. And he's still shooting great from the corners, and he's got this mid-range game. Like, to me, that's a guy that would be foolish to lock in like a 3-year, $45 million extension or something. I would definitely play it out for him in that scenario. And the larger point is, if they go 3 years, 60, which I actually think would be fine, I would be like, that's a good contract. I'd be totally cool with that. If I would be awesome. I'd be totally fine with that if I was a Pacers fan. And as a as a Pacers hater, I would be like, that's actually a fine contract. Like, there's just a lot of money that they're accelerating onto their books now. So if they lock these guys in, I mean, that's basically like that's their core.
So
they still got moves to make. Again, they're not locked in. Like, they've got Mathurin on a rookie contract. They got Jarris Walker on a rookie contract. What his future holds now, I have no idea. They're pretty committed here to Siakam at the 4. It seems
they have another free agent at the 4 too, by the way.
Yes, they have Obi. Obi's a free agent too. Do they want to bring him back? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of decisions.
I think it was Jeff who said 4 for 50 would be in line, which I was like,
no. I mean, it would be.
I think it would be. But
he shot what, 50, 40, whatever the fuck it was from the field.
Cool.
He had like a 67 true shooting. You're just a crazy Obi hater.
No, I would not invest that much in a
$12 million a year. That's too much money for a quality backup.
Do you buy that he's a 40% 3-point shooter?
He did it for a whole year, and I never was surprised that he shot better when in an offense that like is just more involved. Because to me, that was always
they were 5 points better with him off the floor in the playoffs. They were worse on defense with him on the floor. They were like a point better with him in the regular.
But a $12 million a year player is not like
maybe I'm undervaluing that. If you can get Mitchell Robinson for $12 million,
is $12 million a year for a player is like, are you a good regular season player who is not going to completely fuck us in the playoffs?
So you're saying
which I think Obi proved. I think Obi proved that he was a good regular season player who's not going to fuck you in the playoffs. He's not going to be. Is he going to be as good as your starters? No. He's not, obviously. And it's like, look, he's backing up Pascal Siakam. Okay, am I going to kill him for his on-offs here? Like, I don't really see that. I'm
also wondering where else the market is, because there isn't a lot of teams that could surround him with a stretch 5, whether that's Siakam or Turner, a 5-out offense most of the time, right?
Where he's playing minutes with like Isaiah Jackson, and he was fine.
Isaiah Jackson is not Mitchell Robinson, but like he's more of like he didn't take any middies against us. I guess that's a fair point to make, but he can take a mid-range shot. I've seen him take 3s, and he can protect Obi on defense. And I don't know. I mean, if you want to say I'm an Obi hater, that's fine. But like a big,
no, I'm definitely saying you're an Obi.
Okay, hater. So a big who doesn't add value on defense, and
he shot 57% from the field, 40% from 3 this season in 21 minutes a night. Like, I'm sorry, this is not like a crazy to say that 450.
Well, why was he only like playing? Crazy. No, I don't think I think that would be an overpay. But like 21 minutes, he was playing 20 minutes a night for why? He was splitting. That's before even they got Siakam.
Right, but why is that? Like, if I'm paying you $12 million a year, $12 million a year, and you're good in 21, 22 minutes a night, and you're shooting high percentages, and you fit perfectly into what we want to do offensively.
Really, I mean, is he impacting
I don't think that's a problem.
Winning?
I don't know what that means. Like, what is he good? He was a plus in the regular season.
What I'm saying is, who else is paying him much
for his career? For his career at this point, as a bench player for the vast majority of it, He is a plus 4.4 when he's on the floor and a plus 3.2 on off. That is with New York in a vastly different environment than the environment that he was in.
But he got to play off the bench with fucking Quickly and Hart and
right, but you're playing him off the bench. Why? If I told
you, so he's playing against bench players. He's playing with some of the most impactful bench players in the NBA. In the playoffs,
he was a plus with the fucking Pacers this year. Off the bench,
by like 1 point,
+2 on
and their
off,
defense was a lot worse. Court. And yeah, 1, the defense was a lot worse, and 2, in the playoffs it was like -5 on off.
Bench players are there. I don't know where these numbers are just wrong. He's -3.3 on off in the playoffs, and he's a -0.8. So it's not like he was out there and they were just fucking sucking shit.
For the whole playoffs or just against us?
For the whole playoffs. For the whole playoffs, he's a -0.8 on the court, -3.3 on off.
So basically, are you using PVP stats?
I'm using Basketball Reference. I just don't. $12 million for a player who can play.
Maybe I'm just overestimating the 12.
When you can play,
I think we agree that he's a solid bench player, right?
Yeah, and you pay solid bench players at $12 million a year is fine. Like the Knicks bench is crazy because we're getting Deuce McBride for $3 million a year. That's not normal. And honestly, it's the only reason he got paid that number is because he didn't do anything before we paid him, and now he should probably go fire his agent or something. But $12 million. Forget what Dante became. Why did Dante got 4 years, 47, right? The reason being what? Oh, he's a good bench player. And he's going to shoot threes, and we need a guy that can shoot threes. So let's get Dante here. That's what you pay good bench players that are not fantastic, that are not amazing, that might have flaws, that might just be bench players the rest of their career. That's their market. 447, 450. That's less than the mid-level exception for Obi Toppin. That's fine. That's completely fine. That's more than fine.
So the difference I'm seeing, so offense rating plus 1.8. Yeah, so I was -5 was what I saw in PVP stats, but Basketball Reference may be different. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the 12 million part that we disagree on. Don't think that's a guy you can really build around.
You're not building around him. You're not building around him.
I think 4 for 50. We're different on where 4 for 50 means.
What is it look? But why? You can go look down the league. Go look at the contracts at that number. So that's what, 12.5 a year? 12.5 a year average? Like that is literally, you're looking at guys that are.
Well, what's what Mitchell Robinson makes now.
Again, the Knicks signed him at 460 2 years ago on a descending contract. The cap has jumped since then significantly, and you're paying him $10 million less. And who knows how they structure it? Maybe they structure it as a descending contract for all I know. So I don't think it's fair to be like, well, Mitchell Robinson makes 12.5. So how can Obi make this? That's just not how it works. I just
think the fact that it's a big who is going to be defensively challenged in most lineups. And I will say this, I think the Knicks absolutely let him off the hook. Every time he was on the floor, I don't know why they weren't attacking him with Brunson, pretty just incessantly. But I think that just using the raw shooting numbers when they're not really self-created, when it's not huge volume, and it's in an optimized system, and he doesn't add value on defense.
You're criticizing him like he's not. He's a role player. So what is this? If a $450 million contract is role player money, that's not. You're not asking him to create. You're not. You don't want him to create. I just don't get how that would be like this.
For role players, I would generally want players for bigs who can play defense.
I mean, that's fine. I'm just saying $450 million for him. I don't know, man. That to me is in a league where you got contracts that are. You got Kyle Kuzma making what? Fucking $104 million?
Much better defender.
Kuzma's fucking awful. Kuzma is terrible, and he's not efficient at all. He's
as a defender, you don't think he's as good as.
I don't think Kyle Kuzma is good.
Oh, he's not efficient. He's not efficient. Yeah, but he's also asked to play a different role in Washington. There's a very easy scalability argument for a contending team where he's not creating as much.
Well, he was terrible with the Lakers when his role scaled down.
What, with LeBron? Well, when they
He
won
was
the championship,
terrible. He was terrible.
he was good in the playoffs, wasn't he?
No, he was awful in the playoffs. That was like his whole thing. His 2 year, he had a 53.5 true shooting the year they won the finals. He had a 36.6 true shooting the next time they were in the playoffs the next year. His on-offs, I mean, I have no idea. He was minus 10.2 the year they won the finals on-off, plus 2.4.
He was coming in for LeBron, wasn't he? Often. I mean, he was starting.
I would be lying to you if I told you I watched the bubble Lakers super close.
What else did you have to do? It was the pandemic.
I was not interested in watching the fakest playoffs.
You're rewatching The Sopranos for the 400th time?
Probably. Kyle Kuzma is. I mean, he's
Obi's better than Kyle Kuzma. No, but you're saying you got 100.
I don't think if Kyle Kuzma was if I told Kyle Kuzma I want you to play Obi's role, I would rather have Obi top it because Obi is actually good in that role and he's actually efficient in that role, and he's willing to play that role. I know that he's willing to play that role.
I think the last one is the only one I agree on there. But the with Obi, let's say they give him.
I don't know how are you debating the efficiency thing. When has Kuzma been efficient?
I mean, he hasn't played in that exact role, so
his career.
I'm banging on this.
But if he's never played in that role, maybe it's this guy literally turned down a trade to the Mavericks to stay with the Wizards.
Yeah, so that's your last point, right?
But that's
not willing.
That's the point that matters. If he's not willing, who fucking cares?
That's why I said I agree with that point. I will say like he's a lot less of his shots have always been like he has always had to make with less assisted shots. You can say that's an attitude thing, and that's fair. But in terms of skill level, and I do,
he's not good at it. He's not good at creating shots.
Yeah. So the argument is like what we saw with Oubre, I think is a good example. When you go from that and you're kind of forced to play off ball more. Now, if you said he didn't play off ball next to LeBron James enough, why would he do that next to anyone else? Totally fair. Why would he do that next to Halliburton? Moving on. So they pay Obi 4 for $50. And then you pay Miles Turner. You give Miles Turner extension. Obviously, they're going to be in cap issues. TJ McConnell is a free agent next year. Do you think, given all of those,
if you pay them hard, you're not keeping TJ? It just would not make sense.
Do you think he would be on the market?
No, I think what are you going to get for TJ? You're probably going to get like a couple seconds, which is funny because he was amazing in the playoffs. And honestly,
if a team was willing to overpay, let's say a team that he did really well against in the playoffs, and his identity he fits really well. You've been an Alex Caruso proponent. If that's now you can say Indiana wouldn't want to trade a rival, a player who makes them better, but is that something the Knicks should be?
I don't know. The Knicks and Pacers already made a trade last year. I don't know if that would be a huge hindrance.
Yeah, but they weren't both contenders at the same time, and TJ would move the needle, right?
I don't know how much. I honestly, I think rivalries.
Needle, but...
I think rivalries matter more than
No, it's not even about the rivalry. It's when I say rival, I mean they're both literally competing.
No, I get that.
Good.
But what I'm saying is I still think they would if the Knicks were like, we'll overpay for TJ McConnell, and it was a price that Indiana's like, wow, that's amazing. I don't think they'd be like, well, fuck, we can't. Like, presumably, if they believe in Nembhard, which I think they do, then they'd be like, that's fine. Like, it sucks to lose TJ, it sucks that we're sending him to the Knicks, but if we're getting some value that's above and beyond what we expected, and we have faith in Nembhard, then let's go for it.
Is there a valuation there for the Knicks? I wouldn't give up Deuce, but like one of this year's first round picks plus I don't know Bogey. Do you think that would be enough? And do you think that would be?
I don't think they want Bogey. I mean, you could just waive Bogey, trade for TJ McConnell into the non-taxpayer mid-level, and be done with it.
But do you think a first would be enough? Because that seems like a no-brainer for the Knicks.
I have no idea. I have no idea what the Pacers would want for him. He was important to them, and they've been pretty patient. Like, though, when they traded for Siakam, they didn't give up anybody in their rotation that mattered. They gave Bruce Brown, who they wanted to get rid of anyway, and the rest of it was just junk. So they seem okay with having a bunch of guys. Maybe that changes now when you start paying dudes. We saw that with the Knicks over the last couple of years too, where it's like once guys start getting paid or it's time to start paying guys, then the willingness to just kind of clutter the roster changes. But like, that's my point is like, I don't know, maybe like if I'm them and I'm like, okay, Obi is fine as the backup 4. He's nothing special, but he's what he does what we want him to do in that role. Jarris Walker, we took him 9th. He needs minutes to develop. We're really good, and now we're paying Siakam, we're paying Halliburton, we're gonna extend Miles Turner, we're gonna give Nemhard potentially a new contract. Like we made the East Conference Finals. We believe we're a good team. Are you going to be like? Does it make more sense to use Jarris Walker now as a trade chip or Benedict Mathurin, maybe both those guys as trade chips, and maybe you can get a plus wing defender from a team? I don't even know. I'm not even suggesting a name because I can't think of somebody off the top of my head. But like, is that something worth doing?
McDaniels, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know why. I don't think Minnesota would do it, but like, yeah,
they're going to be in tax hell.
Yeah, right, I mean, yeah, they are. I just don't think they'll trade him. But maybe I'm wrong. Either way, whoever the player is, if you can get the type of wing defender that they definitely need still, that's something worth considering. But it also becomes tougher now as you add players. So I just wonder if like this is the right core to commit to. But I don't know. In some ways, I also feel like that's probably just nitpicking and hating as a Pacers hater. Because like they did make the Eastern Conference Finals, and whatever we think of their pathway there,
are they the second best team in the East right now?
No.
If you're the GM, I think you have to look at. I don't think the Knicks are necessary. The Knicks have a better case than them. I think at full strength, it's probably still Philly, even though we beat them.
I don't get that.
So you don't think the Embiid injury was serious and all that, right?
I just don't. But he's always injured.
Yeah, so I think I think it's if you're looking at the second best team, it's the Knicks and the Sixers are like the two main contenders. I would at this point even put the Bucks a tier below. But I wouldn't. But if I'm Indiana, I wouldn't look at this Eastern Conference Finals run as like, we're the second best team in the East. Right?
No, I agree, but I think that it's nitpicking on my part or anybody's part really to be like, well, I don't know about giving Siakam that money. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe they're not the second best team. They're not the second best team in the East. I think that's fair to say, but they still have pathways to get there even after paying their guys. And that's actually an argument to pay Obi because it's like you can still like that contract, whatever you think. I don't think moving Obi at 448 or something, 450 would be a big crisis. And then you can attach, especially if you're like, hey, I'm sure that there are teams that still really like Jarris Walker. I'm sure there are teams that really like Benedict Mathurin. And I think if you attach those guys or one of those guys to OB and they still got picks to trade, that's a pretty enticing package. And now maybe you can get into the ballpark for a higher caliber player that you ultimately do need. So I mean, as much as I don't think in a vacuum, the Siakam contract and the Halliburton one together is like a little dicey. When you look at their team as a whole, I still think they're in a position to make moves that I don't know that you really have a choice. If you're who's their GM? Pritchard, right? Pritchard. I don't think you really have a choice. And one, you're Indiana, so like that guys aren't always dying to come and play there. And the other part is, I mean, the criticism, I guess, of the Siakam one would be like, who else is going to give him that money? He had a really good playoffs. And if I were Philly, I wouldn't look at him and immediately be like, especially if Embiid can actually shoot threes now, which, I mean, he shot over 40% this past year. If that's a thing, like, I don't think it might be a little clunky at first, just like it was clunky at first between Siakam and Halliburton. They seem to figure some stuff out. And their offense was still really good the entire way. So, maybe that market was out there for him. I don't know. I just think that, like, yeah, in a vacuum, I think that contract's, the back end to me probably will not be great, but I get it. I don't think it's.
No, I mean, I think Siakam was the best player in that Knicks series. I mean,
yeah, probably.
Brunson was at his best the best player, but he also had some bad performances, right? And he was hurt. So, and I don't think that I'm not saying that lightly to shit on Brunson. Like Siakam was really good.
He was on fire. I mean, his mid-range game in that series was unbelievable.
He creates matchup problems, right? He can play small ball 5. He can play the 4. That is actually we talk about the fit with Halliburton. That's actually the perfect. You need someone who's a plus defender. He's not an amazing defender, but he's versatile. I think their team construct to make that work, right, where they're saying that we are a 5-out team, they're not that badly set up. They are going to depend on someone has to step up as a wing defender beyond Siakam. Nesmith showed flashes, certainly against Brunson. Mathurin is far beyond that. I have a friend who's a Pacers fan who almost seems out on Mathurin, despite the fact that I think
he's a really talented scorer who doesn't like it's. He gets his points. I don't think he necessarily adds much to the collective offense. And
my Pacers fan friend compared him to RJ Barrett on the Knicks, which I was like, that seems a little bit because Mathurin's a better shooter, right? But
is he? I don't think he's shot well from 3 this year. That's always
higher volume, right?
I don't know. I'll look it up. I remember him not shooting that well from 3.
I mean, I think RJ was always like, if you're taking corner threes exclusively, like you should be shooting better. He shot 37% from 3, but it was only 3.6 attempts per game.
Yeah, it was low volume, right?
Yeah. The point is, I think they actually don't have a horrible team construct. Can you add another star? And you probably need one unless you think Halliburton can scale up to being that guy, which I'm still not sold on. I think Siakam is what he is, probably a really good second option, but not a guy you want to run offense through consistently. But I think that construct is made possible by Siakam and Turner more than anything else. You have a stretch 5 who can protect the rim. I think we probably all really underrated Turner coming to that series. That would have, I think, been the case even if we played them full strength. That is like when you can do that, when you are he's not a fake shooter anymore. He's a real threat from 3. He can put the ball on the floor and he can protect the rim. Can you attack him a little bit in pick and roll? Sure, but not even as much as like Rudy Gobert. They have the skeleton in place. They need someone else to pop. And to your point, they have the flexibility, but I think of all of those, without Siakam, they really didn't have anyone as a help defender who could really add to what Turner was giving them. And that was important. And he can exploit mismatches on offense. If OG can really command 4 for 180, I think Siakam is a substantially better player. I don't think that contract was that off at all. You figure out what to do when he's older. But I don't hate what they're doing from a team building perspective at all.
Yeah,
and I think they have a lot of flexibility. So
yeah, I mean, I think once you traded for him, you were going to have to pay him, right? Which is what the reality is.
It's the OG thing too, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck the Pacers. We did also get news today that the Pistons fired Monty Williams, who has 5 years and $65 million left on his contract. All-time bag getter, Monty Williams. I saw a lot of people like kind of going crazy about this, and I mean, I get it. It's a huge number to just be like, well, I guess we're gonna have to eat that. One, it doesn't count against the cap, so whatever. It's just the owner's money. And he can probably build a couple more prisons and a couple more Little Caesars pizzas to make up for it. I don't know. Like there were people that were like, "How doing this? Like, why didn't you do this sooner? How does this affect the draft and all this stuff?" And I'm like, do we really think that like the new guy Trajan Langdon came in and was like, I really need to sit down with Monty and get his thoughts on who we should draft because we need to consider his views on how to build this roster moving forward. This is a fucking guy who literally said midway through the season they had to have a fucking organizational sit down and like came to a collective decision that they should use Asar Thompson more at the 4 sometimes. And it's like, you fucking needed an organizational sit down to think about trying that? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, I don't know. To me, this is probably the smartest decision they could have made and the best one. All it affects is their owners' pockets. Who fucking cares about that? And now you presumably will do a coaching search. Maybe they already have somebody in place. There's been some Borrego smoke that I saw. And you can move forward. I don't know. I think that's there's a difference between getting the lay of the land with the players versus a coach. If a coach fails at putting players in any type of position to succeed, then he's terrible at his job, and there's nothing else to evaluate, and there's nothing else to discuss. And I will say it's been very fun to make fun of the Pistons. They should not have won. What did they win? Fucking 11 games, or whatever the hell it was this year. 12 games. I don't even know how many games they won. Whatever amount of games they won was far below what they should have. I'm not saying that team should have been a playoff team, but I don't think it would have been. I don't think that team should have at least won like 25 games this year. If you couldn't even get in the fucking ballpark there, then you're done. Like, you're not a good coach and you need to get the hell out. So kudos to them for moving on, because that's the best decisions they could have made.
Yeah, I mean,
would you even look at any of those young guys and be like, oh, this guy got better? Like, and that's I mean, whatever we all think of Jalen Duren and, fucking Ivy and Marcus Sasser and Cunningham and all these guys, if like none of them are really improving, and even if they individually improve, your team is getting worse, there's an issue there. There's definitely a system.
And I actually like a lot of those. I think Cade is, a lot of people are out on Cade. I'm still pretty high. We've talked about this. Right, a lot of people as you.
No, I'm just more ambivalent about him. I'm not. I am done.
He's not RJ level. Is that fair to say?
No, I don't think that. I think more like I'm out on the idea of like Cade Cunningham, super primary creator type hype.
Yeah, he's not Luka. Like, there were people who thought he could be that good at one point, right? Out of the draft.
I mean, who is it? Is it Jay Man that used to do those cool videos? And he had one on Cade Cunningham, and it was like, is he like the future of the NBA or some shit like that?
Yeah, and in fairness, at times, like, he can shoot, he can pass, and he's 6'8", and he has good ball handling, and he's given the Knicks work. Like, let's not understate this. Ivy, crazy. Like, the fact that Ivy hasn't improved in 2 years at all. He was a 2-year college player.
He's gotten worse. He got worse this year.
He's got, like, we don't, and like, if it was just one player, you can say, well, maybe the individual just has some issues, right? But, like a guy like Bones Highland has been in 2 different teams. It probably wasn't the individual. It probably was both those teams. It's the same thing with Ivy. When you have all of these guys, it's the same thing with Duren, right? Like, Duren was very well regarded. He's shown a lot of talent, has not improved at all on defense. And Sasser came in and kind of what he was. I think there just was a lot of misalignment between the front office. Troy Weaver's gone too, right? So I think there's a lot of misalignment between the front office and the coaching staff, and the heads rolled. It's probably not the right hire for Detroit to have made, to be honest. It seems like they were going into a rebuilding situation, and Monty was coming off coaching the Suns. And, like, you have to say this, right? As much as we've given Tibbs a hard time for not playing young players as much as maybe we wanted him to, it doesn't seem like he came into a situation where, they hadn't made the playoffs for a decade, and he was fine with that. He made them a playoff team his first year, but he was willing to do what he had to do that. And young guys improved. That just never happened with Monty. So it's the right move. I don't know.
It's weird because like young guys did improve with Phoenix, but it speaks to the idea of like Phoenix was trying to be competitive, so that maybe like, in that environment, Monty's better suited to get those guys. They also have drafted older, more developed players, right? Like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson,
Ivy, Duren. These are young guys, right? Cade,
especially like Duren. Like, honestly, I don't disagree with you. We talked about it even at the time, and we've joked about it since then. Like, the idea that like Duren was going to come in and immediately be able to anchor defense, so Mitchell Robinson's capable of, and all that type of stuff, was ludicrous.
But it's been 3 years now, and he should have. He has the tools.
2 years.
2 years, but he has the tools, and he hasn't improved much.
Well, no, and I agree with you, and my point is going to be like, maybe he is just dumb as rocks, and he just doesn't understand the defensive stuff and how to like. I'm so confident if you gave that guy to Tom Thibodeau, he would be leaps and bounds ahead of where he is right now defensively and as an overall impact player.
Yeah, and if it was again, if it's an isolated case, it's just Duran. Oh, it's just Ivy. Ivy is just an athletic. He's just RJ Hampton. It's just Cade, who isn't as good as we thought he was. Right? He's not. It's just I mean, Isaiah Stewart is the one guy who's really, I think, has improved and polished his game. But it's multiple guys with very high ceilings that just like Cade hasn't improved. Like he's still kind of the same guy. That is
And
a
I also,
good player, I think.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, but it's also like, and I think I will go as far as to say, I think it's the same thing in Charlotte. By the way, I think LaMelo, if he was in a different environment, would be a lot better. I think Cade is a more
he
polished,
might drive better.
and he doesn't mean to the rim, folks. Also, he could improve driving to the rim as well.
Well, he might just not drive if he was in New York City. He'd be like, yeah, dude, just get a subway pass.
I would rather see him run someone over on the way to the rim instead of shying away. Instead, it's the opposite when he drives on the road. It's just so many guys, right? Like none of them panned out, and it's not like these were like Cade was first overall pick. Ivy was a guy heavily coveted, ended up going 5. Duran was 13th, but in many felt he should have gotten much higher. And like Ivy's and Duran's offensive numbers have been really good. Like the guy can get a double-double when he wants. So the talent is there. It just wasn't the right fit. I don't think Monty's a bad coach. But I think there was just a misalignment in expectations. It is the kind of things that we've seen the Knicks have issues with in the past, and has probably been to this day, as much as you can say the Brunson signing, you can say drafting well, you can say all of these things they've done really well. But the reason why it's worked is because to a man in the organization, it seems like everybody knows exactly what direction they're rowing in. And it seems like that just wasn't the case in Detroit.
Well, I think I think there was definitely butting of heads in how they should approach things and move forward and develop their team over the first couple of years in New York. I think they figured that out during the 2022-23 season. And they've now started moving in a unified fashion forward. But like, early issues in roster construction when you're trying to develop a base and foundation and build from there, it's not necessarily out of that. That's not crazy. It takes time. It's also why, like, I find it funny. I saw somebody today or maybe a couple of days ago that was like, actually, I think it might have been CP the franchise that was like, he tweeted out like all these guys, Mike didn't win until his 8th year, LeBron didn't win until his 7th, whatever year it was. It's like it takes guys time to figure it out. It does take guys time to figure it out. It also takes time for organizations to figure out how to build around those guys and get the right pieces in place. So it's okay to suck early in like a rebuild, but what the fuck were you building towards? And there was never any consistency. Actually, like this year, last couple of years has felt a lot like those crazy turnover years the Knicks would have, right? Where it'd be like, we brought in 10 new guys, and we brought in 10 more new guys next year. And it's like, when you have that much roster turnover all the time, especially with a young team, it's so hard. It's so hard to establish anything because it's a sign that you're not even sure of what you're trying to establish or what you're trying to do. Look, getting Troy Weaver, getting out anybody that was in that brain trust. Obviously you can't get rid of the owner. That's unfortunately the way it works. But getting rid of the rest of the brain trust in the form of Troy Weaver, and I think they got rid of Arn Tellem, who's no longer there, and they got rid of Monty Williams now today. Like that is the right way to go. We'll see if the new guys have success. Hopefully for their fans' sake, they do, because God knows they have been starved for it for a while now. But yeah, we'll see. Last thing, we'll close with this, just because I think it's kind of funny or interesting anyway. There has been reporting now, or not reporting. This is not reporting. This is just odds. But there has been some reporting about this. The Magic are now this from Evan Siddery. The Magic are now co-favorites with the Warriors to sign Klay Thompson per DraftKings Sportsbook. They're both at plus 130. Vegas is buying the buzz around Thompson, potentially leaving for Orlando. The Orlando buzz seems to be growing for him, and I read it. I forgot. I don't remember if it was an article or whatever, but like he does. I don't know. Like it seems like he's very open to leaving, and I mean, I think that if I remember correctly, the Warriors offered him something like a 2-year, $40 million extension prior to last season. I don't know what the hell the Magic are planning on offering him, or if they do offer him, but that would be. I'm not like I genuinely don't know if that's bad or good because they clearly need more shooting. I also think they need more creation, but maybe they think, which is not absurd, maybe they think between Paolo and Franz, I know Franz had a terrible playoffs. Between Paolo and Franz, if those guys continue to take strides as creators, just getting better spacing around them, for now at least, is the easiest way to take a further step forward. I'm very unsure on if that is true or not, but I would be curious to see. I think seeing Clay there would be pretty fucking interesting. You are muted, Stacy.
I've seen them linked to Malik Monk a lot.
Yeah,
I would imagine that would be more of a priority. Fits the timeline a little bit better.
I mean, they probably could. They might be able to do both, depending on how they would work the cap. But yeah,
but that's a little redundant, right? I mean, unless you buy Clay's defense at this point, which I really don't. But
I don't necessarily buy it, but like, I don't know. I guess it would depend on.
And Monk gives you more creation. I mean, there's a lot of people who buy into the idea that, like, given what he showed, especially in Sacramento, like there's probably some untapped creation ability there. You know, if you let him do some of that stuff, which he hasn't always been in the environment to do.
Yeah, I always wonder with that because I agree with you. He did take strides as a creator. I also wonder how much of that had to do with like the way Sacramento plays. They play really fast. They kind of played. I wouldn't call it 5 out because
Sabonis is often operating up top, and you can't leave him open there. So it's functionally like that.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's like I don't know how much to trust the offensive numbers like specifically the creation numbers in terms of playmaking, passing. I don't know how much that translates, but it's not. I mean, it's not crazy. His handle has improved a lot. He can actually. I think we talked about this also last pod, but like he can dribble left now.
You talked about it probably with Prez because
but
that is the guy who talks about handle all the time.
Yeah, he can dribble left now, which is a big leap for him. But like, I'm kind of saying that as a joke, but it's true. Like you remember him coming out of college, the guy could not dribble going left even a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Clay would be interesting there. I don't know. I would definitely just like to see Clay outside of Golden State, just because I have some theories, and I would like to see those theories tested out, but not on the Knicks.
What are those theories?
I just don't think he's really been as I think he's a Hall of Famer because he got drafted into a great circumstance that was perfect for him. I don't truly believe that he the game 6 Clay stuff. I mean, look, he's had some monster playoff games. I don't think his playoff resume is actually that great.
Do you think he's the best off-ball shooter of all time?
No.
Besides his own teammate?
No.
Like better than Steve Kerr? Is he just glorified Steve Kerr?
No, he's a better offensive player.
But he's not as good as a guy like Ray Allen. Probably
Ray Allen's
he's Reggie fuckface. Fuck Reggie Miller.
Yeah, but Reggie Miller is better than him. There's no question about that. To me, Ray Allen was clearly better than him.
But Ray Allen could also do other stuff. Like he was a spot-up shooter in Boston. But
yeah, it's kind of fucking stupid how I feel like the way people perceive Ray Allen now compared to what Ray Allen actually was at his best is so funny.
He sent his dad to prison, bro. Like he had the fucking heart of a killer.
That's true. And did some stuff at Coney Island also.
No, I mean, do you think Clay's washed? I guess that's awesome.
No, I don't think he's washed. I think he's still got offensive game.
Beyond just catch and shoot?
No, not really. Like, I mean, he can still attack closeouts. He's okay. He's fine. But like, I don't know. I always feel like his impact has been overstated because he's played with Steph, which doesn't mean he's bad or that he's not extremely good, but is he a first ballot Hall of Famer if he and
Is
he
he
gets
glorified Kyle Korver?
No, he's much better than Kyle Korver. But is he like a first ballot Hall of Famer if
Kyle
he ends
Korver
up
made
getting
an All-Star game.
the most bullshit All-Star game? I mean, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer though. If he gets drafted to like, I don't fucking know.
The Knicks.
Yeah,
D'Antoni really wanted him.
Is he? Probably not. I don't think he would be. And you could pick any.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would like to see him outside of the Golden State environment. So
I think if Fort Orlando's building, I think Monk's a better fit. I think they want to stay young.
Monk would be a better fit, and I also think like it's a cleaner fit if you still want to keep Suggs in the starting lineup.
Yeah, because he can mitigate some of those. I think how Suggs develops, I think, is the biggest thing. Can Suggs really?
They should probably trade him to the Knicks for 24 and 25.
I mean, Suggs is still what, 20? I know, like
he's 22, right? He's pretty young.
Yeah, he made some creation and shooting leaps that he shot 40% from three.
He just turned 23.
He shot 48, or sorry, 47, 40, and 76 shooting splits, 13 and 3. Playmaking is probably the bigger issue than shooting, but I think like his ceiling is higher than Smart or a guy like Holiday. If he can really get to like creator status, which I don't think is crazy. I mean, Brunson wasn't even in the league at 22, or he was a rookie at 22. And wasn't averaging that, and I think that's what I would really be testing, because you get that, then Paolo gets to do. It's just like giving Julius Randle Brunson, right? If he can really scale up like that to ease that transition, Monk makes a lot more sense. I just in general wouldn't be trying to get older. They're so young. Their core is so young. They're not. I mean, unless they really think Clay puts them over the top next year, which I don't. I think they would have gone. I think they should have beaten Cleveland, to be honest, but they would have gotten smoked by Boston. I think the Knicks at full strength, just because of how well they match up with us, they would have pushed us to 6 games, but I don't think they would they would do better than that. I don't think they beat Philly. I think you want to stay young. I think with Orlando, the biggest question is what happens with Jonathan Isaac, because it's a little bit like the OG situation on a way more extreme scale, because the guy has way worse injury issues, but I would argue that he's an even better defender when he does play.
That'll be up to Jesus.
So there's just so many parts there. Like you get Monk, or I think they can find a shooter. And I think you let the playmaking.
They have Jet Howard. Come on.
They do have a lot of Michigan guys. They probably have the most Michigan guys in the NBA.
They have 3, right?
Yeah, 2 of them brothers. So so Isaac only played 58. He played 58 games this year, but obviously on a minutes restriction. So 16 minutes a game, but clearly really impactful. Even shot 38% from 3 on low attempts. I don't know if you can ever trust his ability to stay healthy, but what happens when what they do with him is interesting. I wouldn't. Clay to me Clay seems like Philly seems like a better option. Oklahoma City is closer to contending. So for the same reasons why OG, a lot of people like OG for them, where they wouldn't really be depending on him every day, I could see Clay fitting in Oklahoma City. I don't think you would go to San Antonio, even though they have cap space. But if you're just looking for someone to create some space for Wemby to develop his game, that doesn't. But I think there's Orlando, I think, is in a different stage, and I don't love that fit.
I agree. All right. Well, actually, we'll close with this. I mentioned Jeremy Cohen earlier, and I mentioned the cap or no cap stuff that he's doing for KFS this week on the podcast. Check it out. He suggested that one Isaac Okoro could be a target for the Knicks, and part of his belief is based on this. Isaac Okoro, this is from the trade deadline from Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype. With that in mind, Isaac Okoro is expected to draw interest at the trade deadline. The Knicks, Hawks, Pacers, Suns, and Bucks are all teams to closely monitor, as all are known to have interest in acquiring a two-way wing. The Knicks could presumably do this if they waive Bogdanovich and then trade for Okoro within the into their non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Again, we don't need to go through the part about how this is all dependent on other contracts. Let's assume that all happens. I don't know. He shot 39% from three, just under 40% from three this year. 39%, 40% from the corners, 39% overall. Didn't shoot a high volume. He is 23 years old. He is good defensively. Been a pretty poor rebounder overall. I don't know if that's about their scheme or not. He wasn't a good rebounder in college, so I tend to think he's probably just not a good rebounder.
He's also not very long. Like he's
not long.
6'5" with a 6'8". Like he's the same size as Josh Hart.
But
Josh Hart is obviously a great rebounder, but like that is just
Josh Hart is
an
just
anomaly.
It's an anomaly. But I just very briefly look. Let's assume Cleveland doesn't want to keep him. I think if you want to listen to the whole argument about why this is possible and why Cleveland wouldn't want him and why they might be interested in trading for the Knicks, go check out part 2 of the Cap or No Cap that Jeremy did this week. But he does fit the bill with what the Knicks have generally been trying to do these last couple of years in free agency, where they've gone after these, I don't want to say second draft guys, but younger free agent guys that for one reason or another has not happened for them in the league. I mean,
or where you could project it happened for DiVincenzo, but it was pretty easy to project it.
Yeah, like they could look at Okoro and be like, all right, the percentages got better, so maybe we can maybe the volume will go up, right? Maybe we can get the volume up here. Also, I mean, is that something you might be interested in? Is he a player that you might you'd be kind of like, all right, if they lose Bogey, but they bring in Okoro, maybe not my ideal kind of fit or swap there, but I get it, and I like it. I found myself being like, my gut instinct is like, fuck Okoro. I don't think he's good, but the numbers, overall impact stuff is pretty decent for him. Like, I think that's a reasonable swap. I think that would be okay.
So Bogey for Okoro? I mean, what do we have to give up a first?
Like Bogey gets waived. The Knicks trade for Okoro into the non-taxpayer mid level. Maybe they give up like a couple second round picks or something.
Oh, at that it's fine.
Even let's say you're taking up the 25th pick this year. Let's just say that.
That is a little rich for my blood. There's a guy named Ryan Dunn who I think gives you basically that.
Okoro, I think the shooting projection for him is even worse than it was for Okoro out of college, though.
Yeah, but so it comes down to, do you buy the shooting? I still don't, not in the playoffs. So I'm going to say the reasons why I would be in favor of it, the reasons why I'd be against it. And I do think like the first round versus second round is kind of a Mendoza line for me. There's a reason to be in favor. One, he is a Tibbsiest guy. Like the Knicks were rumored to be very interested in him at draft time. Obviously they went with Obi, but
he's very athletic too, which I think the Knicks need.
He's athletic. He's strong. He's a really good. You have talked about this, right? Dante and Hart have played that point of attack role and better than other guards we've had, but there are shortcomings there.
Yeah, he shadows really well. He gets over.
I'm happy to say this because we kicked the shit out of them. He is the kind of guy that can even give Jalen Brunson problems at times. I think there's nothing Brunson can't figure out, but he is the kind of defender you'd want against those kind of wily guards. Can cut to the rim. He has decent touch around the rim, and I think that the thing is this, right? Like, you would get worried if you're like, well, is he going to be playing minutes with Josh Hart? I do think that's untenable. I don't care what the shooting percentage from last season says. You cannot play Okoro next to Josh Hart.
You want to dare Tom Thibodeau?
I think that would be the worry.
We're going to get a Deuce, Hart, Okoro, Precious, Mitch lineup.
I was too generous with Hartenstein.
Sims.
No, there's no point guard. He would be the point guard. So, I do think like if you're adding him to this team at full strength, there's spacing issues and it becomes tough. But if you're adding him as insurance because you get injured all the time and you want to rest Hart once in a while, they're probably going to have to start doing that a little bit more. It makes sense, right? And you continue to develop him, and he continues to develop his shot. And he's 22 or 20. He's not that much older than 22, right? He's
23. He just turned 23.
Yeah, so a young guy. Probably not going to have to pay him that much. If it's a couple second round picks, that's fine. If it's this year's first versus like just drafting this what I do think is this same player in Ryan Dunn, I don't really buy the shooting. I guess.
Well, presumably you would be getting him to immediately play in the rotation. I think even if you like Ryan Dunn becoming that in 2 years' time, like it is going to be 2 years' time. He's not going to be in the rotation this year. Dunn would be fucking brutal in the rotation right now.
Yeah, but he's also much bigger and longer and can play the 4.
I think
like
you could. You could still draft Dunn.
That's the other part with Okoro. That's like this is closer to Josh Hart than OG Anunoby as a defensive specialist. He is better than Josh Hart as a defender. I'll say that. But this isn't really a guy you can trust at the 4. This is probably not a guy you want ideally playing the defending 3s. So I don't think you really love him on Tatum, for example, if we're going to play them.
No, you just let Tatum shoot. That's the new defensive strategy on Tatum.
Let him shoot. So like for a low risk acquisition to shore up our depth, sure. But there's also a reason they targeted Bogey and Burks instead of maybe other players they could have got. I think the Knicks realized that it's tough for them to play non-threats. They needed shooting, they needed creation, which are things that Okoro didn't offer you. And so I know the Raptors picked up Bruce Brown's option. If they were going to go for a guy and compromise on that level to get more depth, I would imagine, and they're willing to trade a first for that, I would imagine be Bruce Brown before it was Okoro. Although I know cap-wise, but cap-wise, it probably comes out to the same thing. You'd have to trade Bogey, right? So,
yeah. All right. I think that's a good place to end it. Probably forgot something important. Who cares? All right.
What are your thoughts on that? You're higher on the Okoro thing, or?
I'd be fine with it. There was I think you can probably find a tweet. I had this at last year's trade deadline. So not this past season, the season before when we traded for Josh Hart, before I knew that Josh Hart was going to be available. I think I was like, there was a rumor of you could trade like Cam Reddish and they might give you Okoro. And I was like, yeah, I'd do that. Like he's 20, 21, 22, and he's shown some signs of improving his percentages. So I don't know. Like I think the idea of he's gotten better at shooting, albeit on lower volume. His percentage has improved every year from 3. So he started 29 as a rookie, 35, 36.3, 39.1 last year. I think that part is legit. He's pretty decent inside the arc. He was at 57% from 2 this year, 61.7 the year before, 55.5 is 30.
He's always been a good finisher.
Yeah. His volume is never going to be great. He's efficient on offense in that low volume, though, which is a good thing. He's been a okay, solid impact guy overall. Aside from his rookie year, he's been pretty solid on the floor. His on-offs plus 2.9, plus 0.7, plus 1.9. Like he's fine. I think that there's potential that he can improve. Now, can he get the thing for him is the volume of 3s would need to increase. Can he do that? Will he do that? I don't know. That's the bet you're making. If the contract is something within the taxpayer mid-level or the non-taxpayer mid-level, I think it's a reasonable gamble, and I would be okay with making that because I do think as much as I wanted to see Bogey with this team, the numbers I think are just, and I don't mean his numbers, I mean the financial numbers are just not going to probably let that happen. And getting younger, getting more athletic, getting a guy who you all just mentioned is a good point of attack defender, which I don't think we have enough of, and I don't think you can ever have enough of, is really valuable. And while he can't switch on to the Jason Tatum of the world, I do think he can switch on to like the Jaylen Browns of the world. So, switch 1 to 3-ish. That's pretty valuable. Yeah, I would be okay with it. I'd be okay with it. It's not like,
but
this is not like my dream signing. Like it's just like a thing. Like it's like when they signed Dante. Dante was not my dream signing, but I was like, okay, he does some things. He's a great 3-point shooter, and we need more 3-point shooting, which was like a thing we took away from the playoffs last year, right? We were like, all right, Miami just sat in the paint. We need more guys that they have to honor out there and that can hit 3s. This year, my takeaway from the playoffs was we need to get more athletic on the perimeter. We need to get stronger defensively. I think, and to be fair, Bogdanovic had those 2 great moments early in that Philly series, but he was a non-factor after that, not entirely because of his fault. All right, he gets hurt in Game 5. He wasn't great in Game 3 or 4, but he gets hurt. Shit happens. I do think there's something to be said of just like getting more athletic, getting better defensively. I do think the Knicks need that. So, again, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I think there's a reason
do you
for
think
that.
they would, if they're going to do that profile, would they not go for like Bruce Brown?
I think I would much rather have a core than Bruce Brown.
Really? You think he's a better player, or are you just thinking it'd be cheaper?
I think he is probably a comparable player who more cleanly addresses what those
not
things.
think Bruce Brown is that good of a defender?
Yeah, I don't think he's that good of a defender. I think Okoro is actually a really good point of attack defender.
Cool. Before we get out, I did want to ask you one completely unrelated topic. I know you're a much better tennis player than me. I played your doubles partner and gotten smoked. So I have to ask, given I think both of us grew up with the big 3 in tennis, and then Alcaraz now won his 3rd Grand Slam. Sinner's been playing really well, won a Grand Slam. How would you compare these 2 guys, and even the general tennis vibe now with like the big 3 era looks to finally be over, to that? And like just your thoughts in general, like the tennis thing.
I mean, Alcaraz is definitely on his way. He's definitely the most talented player, I think, in the world right now. Sinner is really good. There isn't quite that 3rd guy yet. There are some competitors for sure. I don't think Djokovic is done. I just think Djokovic is more frail physically than he was, so he's more susceptible to injury.
So he's like LeBron now?
Yeah, he's LeBron. He's basically LeBron. I do think Djokovic probably still wins. I think he's still going to win like another couple majors. So I don't know. I mean, the big 3 era in tennis was just so unprecedented, like how long it was, and it was a big 4 for a while because Murray was also really fucking good.
Well, you saw like Del Potro before he got hurt.
Del Potro probably would have. He probably would have made it a big 5. Like the top end of tennis to me seems weaker than it was during like that kind of.
So like if you see Alcaraz, does he remind you of those guys? Because those guys were good at 2021 too, right?
He reminds me most of Federer than the other guys, because I think Federer he's the best shot maker I've seen. Djokovic is like a robot. He is the best of all time, but this is how I feel about like
LeBron and Kobe.
No, this is how I feel about like Jay-Z. Or I'm like, he's the best of all time, but if you're like, if he's very, very rarely, I'm like, yeah, man, I just want to listen to some Jay right now. But like, yeah, like Djokovic he's the best, and Nadal was a really fun like return of service player and back, like just the ground he could cover and all that stuff. He definitely improved his all-around game. I was never as like, I didn't enjoy watching, or I don't want to say, I didn't find his like shot making to be
aesthetically.
Yeah, I just don't think it was like what made him great was like he was a good enough shot maker and the greatest returner of service and shots ever, like probably the most annoying player in the history of tennis to play against. He was like Agassi on steroids, basically. They don't have all of that stuff yet, right? It's like Alcaraz can be like the Federer, but like Sinner or something. I don't know. They don't have that top end yet of the overall group. But maybe, I mean, Alcaraz is young, Sinner's pretty young. Like these guys can get there. The less said about what's his name? Zverev, the better. He's really good, but fuck him. And yeah, I don't know. You never want to compare to that era. That era was crazy.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I think Alcaraz has won so much so quickly. I am curious. I think that's a good point that everyone compares him to Nadal because Spaniard,
Yeah, I don't see that.
I think like the forehand is just straight better. And he said that, so I would have to agree there. But it's fun.
backhand is like he can hit winners from his backhand too. Like his backhand is probably better at this age than Federer's was.
I never loved Federer's. It was graceful, but even at the end of his career, I never loved his backhand.
No, that was always
It was the weakest part of his game.
Yeah, that was always the shot he was like experimenting with. Really, he was like never really settled on like this is my backhand.
Yeah, but it's cool to see that there's a couple new guys ready to pass the torch, and we'll see who's going to take the torch on from as the LeBron and Steph era fades. And we got a guy who's a contender, so that's a pretty nice time to be a
McBride. Let's go.
I was going to say Precious Achula, but
him too. All right, Stacy, let the people know where they can find you. Plug anything you like to plug.
You can find me Stacy Patton 89. I'll plug all the great work of Strickland, especially all the draft stuff as the draft approaches. Prez is unloading a ton of content. I think the disrespectful comps article, which is always one of the favorites, should be coming out soon. But there's also been our draft profiles that are coming out. You want to know, especially if you haven't been following the draft as closely as we usually do, because the Knicks are actually good this year, but want to catch up. I can't recommend a better person to follow. And he's been, he did a pod with Chris Persiana in front of the pod. He did one with Chuck and Darts. So basically, as the draft comes, follow Prez and read everything he's writing.
Agree with that. Also, check out the article that we just got put up. I think it was yesterday by Desmond Novak. He's our newest contributor on the Strickland. It was about Isaiah Hartenstein and bringing him back. So check that out. That was a really good read by Desmond. Again, Matt Miranda wrote a great piece along with Lucas Kaplan. You can get the preview on the website. You can find the full version on the Patreon. Definitely worth reading. I thought it was really, really fun. And Lucas is great in his own right. So it was a cool little conversation they had in there about the Nets and what their plan is, if they have a plan. I don't think they have a plan. Not my problem. But that's it. That's our show for today. Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to BetOnline for sponsoring it. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week. And I'll see you on Friday.